and a lot of people, the last thing that they want is the truth. The very, very last thing, that if there was a menu of items to pick from, the truth would be overstocked, I think, because the truth is on one level incredibly painful, and so painful that it's the state of watching you go through this for me is truth. I'm seeing truth, but it's so powerful and so painful on one level that it's like I don't know if I'm in shock or what you would call it, but I can definitely see that something else has kicked in neurologically for me, where I don't know, I can't describe the feeling very well, but it definitely, I suppose it's the thing that they call grief and the beginning of that. And I would say that that's a reaction to this truth. A lot of people want to avoid truth. Truth is in the same way that you don't want to go jogging, you don't want to work out at the gym times a million because it hurts.
I find that I cry so much these days when people send me beautiful love notes and truths. And I've learned that it is painful to cry. I don't know why it's physiologically painful to cry, but it is. And I also find that it doesn't last forever, and that it cracks me open. It cracks me open again and again and again and again. And my willingness to be cracked open is the truth. And if I were to not be willing to crack open, I would suffer. There would be suffering. So there's a distinction between pain and suffering. The suffering is when we try to not feel what we feel. The pain is something entirely different. There is pain, but suffering generally has to do with attachment. That we're attached to something that we don't want to let go of.
Well, it's that state that you're talking about when you're crying. It's not like, well, first of all, adult crying is not it's not something I do very much.
It's not charge and discharge.
No, it's something else when that's happening. It's some form of spiritual seizure that happens where there is no control. I just have to go through it, and there's definitely, it's painful, but there's a sweetness behind it that's unlike anything I've ever experienced. I can't imagine being able to live in that state, if that would be possible to live in that state. And I wonder, is that enlightenment? Is enlightenment that feeling of sobbing minus the tears? Is it that feeling of...
I don't see that enlightenment is a word that's a useful word.
Right.
I think that it's being real. And I think that what happens when we grieve in the way you're describing is that we move into a different dimension of consciousness, and it's called love.
Yeah.
It's called divine love. And divines doesn't mean woo-woo God angels and all the company of heaven. It means the selfless pouring out and receiving, the dialectic reciprocity, so that you take it in and give it back like an out-breath and an in-breath. And there is in that pain. But the suffering comes when we are attached to an idea, a mental idea that we have about what should be happening.
Right.
That's where we get caught.
Right. When our plans get interrupted.
When we consider that we have plans. Just stop there, that I have plans, as I should, rather than realizing that this is an effulgent universe that has a thrust and a flow to it, And really, if we would, instead of whomping around trying to plan stuff up, if we would find our way to negotiate into the flow, our worlds would transform.
But that transformation, for a lot of people, is a form of death.
Yeah. You betcha. Because what happens in this work is that which is false dissolves, that which is real begins to shine, called alchemy.
And that's the suffering. The suffering is the resistance to shining.
The suffering is holding on to the old ways when everything in the universe changes constantly. You have to look, you can look outside, which I'm doing right now, and I can see that everything changes constantly.
The shifting light, the wind blowing through the trees.
Everything. And if I am attached to that leaf not blowing, if I'm really attached to that leaf holding still, then if it moves, I'm going to suffer. So, letting go of attachment is one of the big things I'm doing right now. And it's so hard to ride the edge between love and attachment.
Right. Yes, that's the big confusion, isn't it? That's such a big confusion. People have confused love with attachment. People think that a relationship, they get into these relationships that are solely attachment with no love at all, and they think that the attachment is the when you get in the predicament where you want to get in a fight with someone so that they'll say that they need you, instead of just letting them be as they are. That's a very common thing that happens, where people will try to this is the thing where people will withdraw themselves from another person to manipulate the person into saying, I need you.
That's charge and discharge.
Yes.
There's a lot of charge and discharge that happens in intimate relationships, and I'm putting intimate in quotation marks.
Why?
Because they're nothing but melodrama. And melodrama has nothing to do with the truth. It's all mental ideas and attachment and suffering and gooey, massy knots of snot.
Yeah. Yes, that doesn't last. It is fun for a bit, though, right? I mean, charge and discharge is... We can't just wipe charge and discharge off the sheets.
We can, but it'll come back.
I mean, there is that there is. See, this is the thing, and this I think is an idea that torments people, because what we have here is, what you're talking about, at the state of love, non-attached love, and then the other side that you just portrayed, which is this gooey, mucusy gamesmanship that is the mating ritual and all the various games that humans play with each other, that's based on power dynamics or based on charge and discharge and attachment. And so then you have this sort of sense of the judger who watches these things and says, oh, look at you now, you're just engaged in attachment, or, oh, here we are now, we're feeling love. I've heard this so I heard this awesome analysis of, the temptation of Buddha, about this, the Buddha sitting under the Bodhi tree, and there's several temptations that come to Siddhartha Gautama as he's journeyed to this, out into the forest. He's sitting under a tree, and he's decided that he's going to gain enlightenment or he's just going to die. And so there's these three visions that he's met with as he is tempted by Mara, the force that is a term for Maya illusion, attachment tests him. And one of these visions is women, the marriage or the perfect relationship, or he's met with this idea that here's your perfect soulmate lover fawning over you. And the analysis of this is that didn't represent an actual physical. These were the daughters of Mara, is what they're called. That doesn't represent a physical form, but rather that's the part of the mind that when you start getting towards what you consider spiritual realization, earlier when I said the word enlightenment, that's the part of your mind that's like, oh, look, this is it. Now you're feeling real love. Mm-hmm. Now this is real love. Oh, you've done it. You're so very spiritual right now. Instead of letting yourself get into the sticky moments too.
Here's what I would have to say here. As you were speaking just now, I came up with some very important things. And what I came up with was a broad-reaching sense that our culture and our world in which we live is like a snot ball.
Okay.
And that we, when it's big enough, we want to discharge it. Prior to that snot ball builds up charge.
Okay.
And that there is a certain kind of attachment to the snot ball.
Yes.
And that this is pretty much what describes our relationships. They're snotty relationships,
yes,
for the most part. They're not very real. I mean, mucus isn't what I would personally call a high form of reality.
You need it.
You need it when you're sick.
Right, okay. I understand what you're saying.
And, in a certain sense, the word pearl has been used, the pearl beyond price, which is to describe Christ consciousness or to describe what the complete human can be once it is developed and transformed in the human life. And the pearl, if you look at it, the pearl could look... If you looked at a snot ball and you looked at the pearl, you would have to look sometimes a little bit hard to see the one and distinguish the one from the other. But one is totally different from the other. That's what the ego does. The ego tries in its very finest, valiant way to form what is real within itself. And so the snot ball, human, is the ego equivalent of the pearl, the Christ consciousness.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying, but it's still it's a pathetic synthetic manifestation.
But we don't know it.
Right.
It cannot be pathetic if we don't know it exists.
Right.
And we don't. And that's why we can have compassion for people like KK.
Or ourselves.
Or perhaps ourselves. As we see that we are ignorant about the snot ball false self. That we work so hard to make look like a shining pearl.
Yeah, you're talking about trying to polish a turd.
I am.
And
we do that all the time. And my whole culture is making a gazillion fortunes on polishing turds. And there are a few of us that are actually working to become the pearl. The real pearl beyond price. And certainly, anytime you realize within yourself the pearl beyond price, you realize, good Lord, this totally is beyond price. There is nothing more valuable than this. And let me just say again that I didn't get to this, even to knowing it or to glimpsing it. I didn't get here casually. I got here by waking up at 5 o'clock every morning and studying and inquiring and being ruthlessly honest with every manifestation that came up in me so as to find what was true again and again and again. And what I'm finding now at the end of my life is that what is true, as you have said to me, Duncan, what is true can't be bought. What is true is simple. What is true is so basic and so perfectly useful for us to negotiate our ways through our lives. But the trappings, the false pearl trappings, are in our way. The attachments that go along with the false pearl trappings are in our way. What do we start with? We look at the last time we charged and discharged. You could just do that, you know? What's wrong with that? Okay, so Duncan went to breakfast. I turned on my computer and put in Duchess Kate Blogspot. And there she is, getting caught in the grill with her high heel shoe.
Yes.
That's charge and a discharge. That's what I can look at. And then I can inquire into it. How come I wanted to do that?
Let me tell you, Mom, that's pretty tame compared to what a lot of people looked at in their laptops.
I'm an old woman. I'm just an old woman.
But it's still all the same thing. It's still all. It's still all. You engage whatever the thing is. Maybe it's video games. There's an example of a distraction where there's just nothing that you get out. Or just surfing the internet, just basic internet surfing. You'll get done with 30 minutes or 45 minutes or 4 hours or how, depending on your addiction, of just boring internet surfing. And at the end of it, you'll feel empty and kind of groggy and tired. And you'll think to yourself, well, that was a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying is that though that may be a waste of time, you can actually, if nothing else, look at it truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
And in some way that will push you out of the addiction. Is that what you're saying?
I am certainly not saying that.
Oh, sorry.
I'm saying truly that everything is grist for the mill. But if you have an agenda to get yourself out or push yourself out of the addiction,
yes,
you're in your ego.
Oh, see, now this is where you're right here, Mom. This thing that you're talking about, this is the infuriating aspect of so many different philosophies, which is it's saying, no, you're in Chinese handcuffs. If you struggle to get out of them, it only makes them tighter.
True.
So what do?
You see how willful you are and how the willfulness is a part of that snot ball self. And willfulness is I need to control things. I have to control things. I want to control things. And if I control things, things will be exactly the way I want them to be. And then I will live happily ever after. Ta-da. Which is contradictory to the entire way of the universe. The way the universe works is not that way at all. It's the exact opposite. The universe is a flow, a mysterious flow. It has a directionality to it. It arises from nothing. It appears and it disappears. We are a part of it. Everything is a part of it. It has an intelligence. It optimizes. It has a quality of optimization to it. And when we perceive it enough to align with it, we get out of our willfulness and get into a phenomenon called surrender. And the surrender is to the surrender into the intelligence of the universe. If you haven't noticed, the universe seems fairly intelligent.
Yes.
What you are doing with your willfulness and with your saying, I have an agenda to get out of my addictions, you are blocking the flow of the universe through yourself, through your own consciousness.
Is letting go also, based on what you're saying, another form of trying to control this thing? It's like you can't hold on and you can't let go. You can't act. Any action that you do or that you take, isn't it all willfulness?
All willfulness. And if you let go and you say, okie dokie, now I'm going to let go of this addiction. That's what I need to do right now. Here's step 1, 2, and 3. Nope. The only way we can let go, the only way we can surrender is to say, oh, fuck. I was trying to find a better word. You say, nothing to do except see my willfulness. That's it. I can see it. And not only can I see it, but I can go deeply, deeply, deeply into understanding how willfulness became a humongous part of my life, because I can go back into my childhood and see how there was nothing solid. There was nothing to trust in my early years. I had to create some kind of internal sense of will in order to feel held.
Right.
I understand where it came from, but is it out of date now? It is. But do I know why is it out of date now? Because I see what happens when I let go. When my consciousness chooses to let go into this optimizing thrust of reality.